For Boris Johnson, the local elections on May 6th are the first big test since the end of 2019. Criticism is promptly raining because of the design preferences of his fiancée and nepotism by party leaders. But the greatest danger threatens him from the man to whom he owes his office. On Thursday morning, the front pages of the major British newspapers made Boris Johnson uncomfortable breakfast reading. Interior resign. With this line, Metro gave the Premier a verbal blow because of the possibly illegally financed refurbishment of his official apartment. Nervous Downing Street fears evidence, the Times said, alluding to alleged evidence of undeclared donations. These days, Westminster is once again like a wasp's nest in which the Prime Minister, notorious for his antics, stumbles. Constant briefings and counter-briefings, a permanent who knew and said what, gives the administrative district the heated atmosphere of the old days. Will the concentrated attacks by the media and the opposition actually make Johnson nervous? Probably not for the moment, because at the same time the latest poll came out before the regional and local elections, which are due next Thursday. They are the first major test for the Tory boss since his election triumph in December 2019, despite the corruption allegations against the Prime Minister. According to a BMG survey, his Conservatives are clearly ahead of the Labour Party. In terms of popularity, Johnson has a whopping 16 points clear of his rival Keir Starmer, the head of Labour. If these polls are also reflected in the election results next Thursday, they would be renewed evidence of Johnson's successful strategy of repelling any attacks by the London establishment and instead giving his full attention to the people out there. A strategy that Johnson adopted from his ex-advisor Dominic Cummings. Cummings led the successful 2016 Brexit campaign that cemented Johnson's rise to power. Once on Downing Street, the team operated a brutal policy. Remember the expulsion of rebel group colleagues or the confrontation with the Supreme Court about a forced break in Parliament. Always success, as Johnson's lavish majority in the general election at the end of 2019 proved. On Wednesday, the head of government reintroduced his "we against the elite" strategy at the Prime Minister's questions. It became so loud that we got a glimpse of Johnson's almonds that normally only his dental hygienist has. His tonsils, not almonds, his tonsils practically shot past his incisors and danced a cancan on the desk in front of him, says the Times columnist, describing the Prime Minister's outburst. The volume in the lower house, still sparsely occupied due to the corona regulations, was reminiscent of times before the pandemic. Johnson waved his right hand 17 times, pointing his index finger at Starmer like a pistol barrel. On Wednesday, the head of government reintroduced, as I said, his us against elite strategy. And that will be a very interesting thing if that really works on the Thursday elections. And if someone still buys that, what is unfortunately to expect, that people buy this from someone attending elite schools. Well, the average Joe like me didn't attend elite schools, and if someone like him in Germany would say the same, I would just say, "What? You probably don't even know what a can of milk costs." So it's quite amazing when you have a look from the outside. But Starmer may be happy that a plexiglass pane installed between the Prime Minister and the opposition chief catches any aerosols, and that the lower house staff thoroughly rubs the dispatch box with an antiviral cleaner after each appearance. Despite all the good surveys, Johnson and his team face a serious challenge. Until the middle of the week, the Prime Minister was able to dismiss the accumulating allegations as a desperate attempt by his opponents to get off the defensive. But now the Electoral Commission, responsible for monitoring party and election funding, has announced an official investigation. there was a sufficient basis for examining whether the renovation of the apartment at Downing Street number 11 was improperly funded. The mass newspaper The Daily Mail had already revealed weeks ago that Johnson's fiancée Carrie Symonds had the official residence in the heart of Westminster remodeled for a total of €230,000 by a designer coveted in the London jet set. The annual expense for the maintenance of the Premier's apartment is set at the equivalent of €35,000. The costs are getting completely out of hand. She's ordering gold wallpaper. Johnson is said to have complained to his advisors in early 2020, shortly after moving into the residence. Said wallpapers by designer Lulu Lytle are indeed not an IKEA budget at €1,000 per roll. A wealthy Tory supporter allegedly gave Johnson an advance of £58,000, which, contrary to the rules of the Election Commission, was probably not reported. The whole affair has meanwhile been given the title Wallpaper Gate, based on Richard Nixon's Watergate. According to the statutes, a British Prime Minister earns the equivalent of around €170,000 a year. That's financially decent. As a columnist for the Daily Telegraph said, Johnson received almost $220,000 plus his income as a member of parliament and from engagement as a speaker. In addition to a new apartment, new partner and new child, the divorce from his second wife Marina Wheeler last year, with whom Johnson was married for 25 years, is said to have not been cheap. They also have 4 children, some of whom are still in school. The Daily Telegraph, loyal to the Prime Minister and his longtime employer, even drew a comparison with Johnson's idol Winston Churchill. As is well known, because of his demanding lifestyle, he too had to repeatedly pump generous friends on for money. There's nothing to see here and nothing to worry about, Johnson insisted on Thursday morning while visiting a London school. In tow, he had the popular Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, who, like other cabinet members, has made public gestures of loyalty over the past few days. I prefer to concentrate on the things that are really important, the Prime Minister countered when asked what conclusions he could draw from a negative result of the election authorities' examination. Until this is available, Johnson is facing another event which will then trigger nervousness. At the end of May, Chief Advisor Cummings, who was fired by Johnson in November, testified before a parliamentary committee on corona management early last year. At the end of last week, Cummings suddenly stated on a blog that he had warned Johnson about potentially illegal donations for the renovation at the time. Cummings' comment appeared to be in response to being named in several newspapers the day before as an informant for internal things with the Dyson, for example. Now Cummings is urgently calling for an investigation into the COVID management of Johnson's government. Johnson traded well below the standards of competence that the country deserves. He, Cummings, has plenty of evidence to offer, with which the man to whom Johnson owes his power could become a real threat to that power. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel. Auf Wiedersehen.